a book review of the Dictionary of Lost Words.
That's Nell. I'm Scott, and we are Gunpowder, Fiction, and Plot.
That's who we are. We talk about books and stuff.
Yeah.
On this channel.
Yeah, and the books is just an excuse to insult Holden Caulfield in the comments. So,
make sure you bring your best Holden Caulfield insult.
Yeah, if you don't want to talk about the Dictionary of Lost Words, we're just down for insulting Holden Caulfield in the comments.
Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content. I want to say thanks for watching, especially for our regular subscribers. You guys are the best.
You deserve a cup of tea and a scone.
Ooh.
Anyway.
He's distracted me with promises of scones.
I have. The question is, do they deserve like a savoury scone like chives and garlic or pumpkin? Or do they deserve like a fruit scone or something?
I wouldn't mind as long as there's a little bit of butter on it. I don't actually mind what flavour you make me.
Okay. Well, we're filming a book review now. Should I like turn the oven on and start kneading dough?
Yes. You said scones. Okay. So we're reviewing the Dictionary of Lost Words. It's got a pretty good Goodreads rating of 4.35, but there's not many people who have reviewed it yet because it's only out this year, so it's only a new one.
Brand new. Only just over 1,000 people have reviewed it, and the highest ranking review on Goodreads is the publisher, which may be a little bit biased. It's about 406 pages in our edition, and it's a historical fiction. We read it because it's our book. Was our book club book? The author of this is Pip Williams. Pip Williams is a UK author who moved out to Adelaide, South Australia. I'm not quite sure when, but...
I think she was a kid, but...
Yeah, so she's at least 50-50, but probably more Aussie than...
We're claiming her.
Yeah, like, if you're a Kiwi and you've ever, like, visited Australia, we'll claim you. So if you're a Pom and you live here, we're going to claim you too.
What's it about, Scott?
Okay, this is about the writing or the creation of the Oxford English Dictionary.
The first edition.
The first edition of it. All the characters in this book are real life characters except for Esme, who is the protagonist. She's an invented character, and it's about all the words that didn't make it for whatever reason. The word bondsmaid goes missing in the first edition, and it causes some sort of hoopla or something historically. Hoopla.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was the inspiration for Pip Williams, and she has sort of invented this character to discuss that idea and explain it maybe.
So, there's lots in this book. It's quite feminist. It's quite feminism. A lot of the words that go missing are related to women and the role of women. And our protagonist does go through a bit of a journey about looking for illegitimate words.
Quim.
Which are the words of women, essentially. So there's definitely a big, fat feminist lean in it. But one of the things that came up in our book group discussion was a bit of a bone of contention. I read this book assuming that Lizzie, the character who plays the maid, the maid character, was black.
Not the actress who plays her.
No, it's not a movie yet. I just assumed she was black. I don't actually think it says anywhere that she is black. No one else assumed that she was black.
No, Kate did.
No, Kate chose to interpret it as Lizzie being black.
Oh.
And I think that was a conscious choice. But whereas my assumption was subconscious. It may have been suggested by Kate in our discussions because she did get ahead of me in the reading it. But I don't actually think it was. I think I just made that assumption all on my little lonesome.
Yeah, I have to say, when you brought that up at book club, I was like, what? She's not black. They never said she was black.
When Kate brought it up, I was like, why are we talking about this? Of course she's black. So...
Yeah, and in the book club we discussed whether, because this book is based in London, we discussed whether people in that time, in the position that Lizzie was in, she was, whether they would be black or white, and we sort of said they'd probably be white. But that was a generalisation that we weren't comfortable with.
I definitely think that if you choose to interpret Lizzie as being black, a lot of the class issues that are raised between Lizzie and the main character, Esme, also become race issues. And it gives a level of complexity to Esme's journey that involves race in a way that it wouldn't otherwise, because there's no other character for that to bounce off of, which made it more interesting to me than if that had not been present. If I had thought Lizzie was white, it would not have been as good a book for me.
That's a really good idea. Pip Williams should have written it in the book.
Potentially, but there's no. It doesn't say she's white either. So if you...
I mean, it doesn't say Esme is white, but you have assumed she's white too. Like, it doesn't say any of the characters.
No, it doesn't. But I guess the most likely person to be black is the maid. Maybe it's too racist for me to have made that assumption. I definitely think that there were like language clues that maybe I've misinterpreted. But I didn't even realise that it was an assumption that I made, to be honest.
Well, if there were language clues, I've either interpreted them as like Cockney or something, or they've gone over my head, because, yeah.
I'm not saying that I didn't completely fantasize the whole thing, but what I am saying is choosing to interpret it that way gave it a richness that it didn't otherwise have.
So if you read it, delude yourself into thinking that Lizzie is black.
Or tell me why I thought that, because that would be really interesting to me. I'm almost tempted to go back and reread it just to figure out why I thought she was black.
Yes.
Yeah, but not that tempted. One of the main ideas, I guess, is words as a system or a byproduct of oppression. Like, is the word that oppresses people a system of oppression, or is it a byproduct? Is it created by the systems of oppression and therefore a byproduct? How much control is in the words?
Yeah, I think there's two things you can discuss here. There's, first of all, the first word that goes missing is the word bondmaid, which essentially means indentured servant, and that's the character Lizzie obviously identifies to that and says she's a bondmaid, and then you have all the words that relate to women and the lower classes that are kept out of the book because they're deemed indecent. Yeah.
And because they're not written down, because a lot of the lower classes at this point didn't have... There was no lower class publications, I guess. And true to life, the Oxford English Dictionary required there to be proof from a publication that a word existed for it to be... So common usage was not enough.
Yeah. And so this is what one of the characters, what the main character does, Esme, is she writes down these words that she encounters when she talks to, when she buys her groceries and when she, just encounters people of the lower class. Yeah.
Yeah, she tries to document the daily words that aren't going to be in the dictionary, which is really interesting. It's interesting as an exploration of the kinds of words that weren't documented then, and also as a discussion of how that perpetuates systems of power and oppression.
Yeah, we can see we can see how Esme is repressed throughout the book. We can see how Lizzie is repressed throughout the book. We can see how Mabel is repressed.
Yeah, Mabel, yeah, for sure.
In the book.
And how language is part of how she takes back her power, particularly with Mabel. But that language is considered to be not valid. And that's how we undermine the power of those that we don't... of those that we're oppressing, I guess.
And how Mabel was so eager to run up to Esme and to give Esme her words.
To legitimise them.
Yeah.
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 It's really interesting. Esme definitely goes through a journey that I went through when I was growing up. I have always been a bit of a literary person, and I think anyone who reads a lot goes through a stage of being a bit of a grammar Nazi.
You all know what they're talking about.
They're
all book people, they know.
Yeah, they know. But actually correcting people's language and colloquialisms and judging people by their level of literacy or level of English literacy is a bit racist and definitely classist.
It ain't right.
It's not. And Esme goes through that journey, and like in a really extreme way. She starts by being really defined by the Oxford English Dictionary and surrounded by it, and those definitions, are the validity of her existence. And then slowly throughout the book, as she explores these lost and discarded words, she begins to understand that language actually needs to encompass everybody, and that you can't have a board of men who decide what is and is not correct and still have a system of communication that isn't oppressive to portions of society.
That was men were deciding what was going into the book, and all the words they were all, I'm not sure, are we allowed to say cunt on YouTube? Because that was one of the words in the book.
Yeah, and I actually really liked that, because the way they discussed it was they were talking about the C edition and the big controversy of the C edition, but at that stage our central character was still quite a young child, so the word was never said until much after the C edition was published, and she was then clued into what the controversy was. I just thought that was so adorable.
So what did you love about this book, Nelle?
I loved the relationship between Lizzie and Esme. I loved the exploration of women's issues. I enjoyed Esme as a character. I really related to her. It was an easy read. It probably could have done with an extra, a little bit of... It was probably a bit simpler than I really ideally wanted. But it was enjoyable.
Yeah. I really liked her father in it. I thought that was...
Oh, he was a very idealised daddy, wasn't he?
Yeah. He was quite an understanding father, but he was also a complete idiot at the same time.
Yeah.
It's just like when Esme gets her first period and he's like, oh, I probably should have told you about this already.
That's funny.
I'll go get Lizzie to deal with it for you. And that's all he does.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Esme thinks she's dying because...
Yeah.
But yes, I really liked that. Him as a character. What didn't you like about it?
I thought that there was definitely some simplification of some of these issues. Once Lizzie is no longer black in my mind, the lack of discussion of race in this context is problematic for me. And other than that, it was probably just not quite as deep a dive as I wanted it to be.
Yeah, I think I agree that it didn't go very, very deep.
I do think that a lot of that was sort of bound up in the fact that you don't find out until the very end how accurate to history Pip Williams has bothered to be with the characters that aren't Esme. And how true to the history she has been in matching her story through. And maybe if I'd had an appreciation for that throughout the text, that might have made it more enjoyable.
I mean, I think that's still really a valid thing to throw at them out there, that she hasn't gone into enough detail on issues. I mean, Esme is a made-up character. Esme's trip to Scotland for school is completely made up, and it's completely brushed over, and it's important.
It's important, yeah, for sure.
And there's actually, like, there could be a lot of meat on there. There's a lot of juicy discussions that could have really lifted this book in just that one bit.
I definitely think also that a lot of people in I did not have a problem with it, but a lot of people in our book group had difficulty believing the level of Esme's naivety when it came to things like sex and baby making and all that sort of stuff. And I think that probably needed a bit of work. If you wanted the character to be that naive, then maybe you needed to have a bit more exploration of that naivety.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of... She should have foreshadowed... Oh, not foreshadowed. She really needed to build that character. One of the problems she had with building Esme as a character was that for quite a thick book, she moved on quite fast. She wanted to paint her whole life.
Yeah, it's her whole life.
And suddenly Esme is a grown-up, and you realise she's a grown-up, and a little bit in your head she's still 7 because she was just 7. And...
Yeah, I feel like that's why I just sort of accepted her naivety.
But I feel like she kind of relied on that to build her naivety, like, you still remember her as 7, but, you know, at the point where you think a 7-year-old is having sex, they're not a 7-year-old, or you've got some problems. And, yeah, I think that was let down in there. I think that it was quite a watery...
Diluted.
It was so diluted. I can't understand how this book is as thick as it is, and really it could have been...
Yeah, it needed a bit of compression maybe.
It doesn't say a lot for it doesn't give a lot of bang for its buck.
I definitely thought there were lots of starts of ideas, like starts of conversations, starts of discussions, but not a lot of thorough exploration of any of the ideas.
Yeah, and for me, the whole suffragette thing, it just felt like an appendix to the book. It felt like... It
was definitely like oh yeah, that was going on at the same time too, I better include some of that.
Yeah, and I actually don't think that that's the intention of Pip Williams in doing this. I just think that the whole thing, because it's so watery and it's I mean, it's not very gelatinous. It's you know, I think because of that, it just feels like like, why is it even in there?
I definitely think it started some of the feminist conversations, and it started some of the... I think if you were an early feminist, or just finding feminism, this might be a really interesting book. But as someone who has explored sort of feminist ideas, particularly ideas around language, and feminist history around suffrage, this was very light on.
Also, the arguing, I mean, I know she was trying to show both sides of the argument, but the arguing for non-violent suffrage is really... It was so stupid in my mind. Like,
I mean, it's funny because it literally didn't work.
like historical
That's
content.
not how it happened.
Yeah, and she's gone to the effort of being historically accurate in so many places.
But she really wanted to have that convincing argument for non-violent protest, which is not how we got suffrage in the UK.
And in fact, you know, for somebody who's done so much history research, she really needed to research non-violent protest and tell me one example of where that actually happened.
Yeah. Well, I think that's about how history is presented, but yes.
The history is written by the winners, and the winners don't want you to be violent.
What did you rate it?
I only gave this one 2 stars.
Whoa, I was not that harsh. I did not think it was that bad. And while I have definitely diluted my initially quite good impression of it, because I think I made an assumption that was incorrect about Lizzie's race, I did enjoy the book, and I did relate to the Esme character as a bit of a wordy girl. Yeah.
There's enough in there if you're the right person to.
It was an enjoyable read. I think as a book club read, our book club likes to get into it, you know.
Actually, do you know, it was a really good book club book because it resulted in one of our best book club meetings. You know, we had a really good discussion with people about stuff.
About whether Lizzie was black or not.
But other stuff, like, it just...
Yeah, it did. It has a lot of good conversation starters, I think.
Yeah. So, it's probably a good one to read to buddy read with a friend.
Yeah.
Or something. So, yeah, if you're into buddy reads, get into that.
Or if you just don't want something super heavy.
Yeah, and it's probably aimed at...
It's definitely designed.
A younger market than us.
I would go the other way.
You think it's aimed at an older market?
Yeah, I reckon this is...
It's aimed at a less reader market than us.
I think this is for the casual reader, not for the booktuber.
Yeah, but there'll be booktubers out there who absolutely love this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's all I've got to say about it.
Yeah.
We publish videos on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of them. And like this video because while we sort of ragged on the book a little bit, it was still fun to watch. Tell us in the comments what book club book your book club talked about for ages but basically said was rubbish.
And if you've read this book, let us know what you thought. And if you're going to pick it up, let us know. There's no, shame in picking it up just because I've rated it 2 stars. Basically, if you're going to restrict yourself for that.
Scott's a grump.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.